Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Miriam Monasch, the director of the upcoming Six Points theater show, The Wanderers, running April 29th to May 14th. We talk about how she got into the theater, working collaboratively with the actors she's directing, and the new play she's working on writing that hits very close to home on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we get started, be sure to check out some of the other podcasts that Jewfolk produces, like The Jews Are Tired, where Lev Gringos is taking a deep dive into Jewish news, Kumba Hineni, Jewfolk's podcast on intersectionality with your host, Enzi Tanner. And if you're looking for a weekly dose of Jewish pop culture, check out The Bagel Report, produced by Jewfolk in partnership with Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California. Go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast to learn more. Miriam Monasch, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So Miriam, you are the director of the upcoming Six Points Theater show, the final show of the 22-23 season, The Wanderers, written by Anna Ziegler. So I guess for starters, as we jump into it, tell me a little bit about the show and a little synopsis. And
if you've seen any of Anna Ziegler's other shows,
okay,
in Photograph 56 and 51? 51. And they did Actually.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very smart writer, very smart. And this is a wonderful show. It's basically contrasting two married couples. One is actually the parents of one of the younger couples.
Okay.
And the younger couple is biracial but has known each other forever and ever and a day. The older couple is Esther and Shmuley, and they are from the Satmar community in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Okay.
And one of them, the mother, leaves the community and takes her son Abraham. Abraham is the younger man that is mainly the narrator throughout the story. And he is married to Sophie, whose mother, Rivka, was also escaped from the Satmar community.
Okay.
I should say escaped from, but left the Satmar community and then married an African-American man.
Okay.
So the kind of goes back and forth between those two couples. And then there's a fifth character, a famous movie star that Abe has had a crush on forever. And she comes to one of his readings and they start up an email correspondence. And so that gets a little juicy in there. And how that affects the marriage is also big, major.
And you mentioned the roles of Shmuley and Esther are played by former Who the Folk interview subjects, Avi Aharoni and Leah Kalish, both terrific artists.
Yes.
In their own right. And it's a cast full of people who are experienced at Six Points Theater and have done previous shows there.
Yes, the two, I've worked with Avi before. I directed him in Natasha and the Coat.
Okay.
You saw that. I've done 3 other shows there, aside from Natasha and the Coat. So,
okay.
And I've acted in 3 of the shows there. So I have a long history with 6 Points when it was Minnesota Jewish Theater.
What is it about working with Six Points Theater that is so appealing that you keep coming back in a variety of roles, both on stage and behind the scenes?
Well, I think part of the joy for me about working with 6 Points is I have a good working relationship with Barbara, the producing director.
Mm-hmm.
And she always has access to excellent designers and really excellent actors, which is a wonderful thing. When you can find somebody who will support your artistic vision in that way, it's pretty wonderful.
So given that you have this career both as a director and as an actor, do you have a preference of which you do?
They feed different parts of my theatrical soul.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Sure.
As an actor, for me, it's very interior. I'm an intuitive actor,
Hmm.
and I can dig really deep for emotions. So when I do that, it's very much soul revealing, but it's also very isolated. But then I get all the applause, which is fabulous. As a director, which not a lot of people know what exactly we do, the main thing is I get to have control over absolutely everything. And I love that. I am a little bit of a control freak that way.
Okay.
From, having the final say on basically everything that happens on that stage, from the design elements to the movements to the music to the actors. And, that obviously they are huge contributors, but I get the final say when it comes to, nah, I didn't like how that worked. Try it this way.
Are you willing to sort of take suggestions from the actors? Obviously, you have a vision, but like I can only imagine that there's a scene one of your actors is like, this doesn't feel quite natural. It doesn't flow very well. What if we did it a certain way? You're open to that?
Absolutely. No, I'm very open to it. And I tell that to my actors too. In fact, we had a little discussion about it yesterday. I went to one of them specifically and I said, Are you feeling comfortable? I feel like we've kind of trapped you in a specific situation. And she was like, well, and I said, talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me the logic behind it, if there is any, or if it's just an intuitive feeling. And basically, then I went and opened it up to the rest of the cast because we're just now finishing up the blocking process.
Okay.
Who moves where, when. And I always do that. I pre-block, which means I kind of go through the play in my head and write down where I think it will work on the set that we have.
Hmm.
But then in the process of rehearsing after the blocking, that often changes because, it's clunky or, I didn't take into account, a lot of different factors. So, yes, I like to work collaboratively with my actors.
Yeah, I know Avi Aharoni a little better than the others, but I know he has directed, he's written, he's acted, like he's done sort of all of those things. So I'm sure there are some people with whom you've worked where they may not have that sort of similar background where they are happy to just sort of take the direction and follow your vision, right? I mean, I would imagine it comes with the experience, basically.
I think that that's true. I've worked with kids on rare occasion. That's not easy for me because they, of course, don't have, in general, a lot of experience. And
Sure, sure,
they
sure.
kind of want to tend to just go here, there, and everywhere. And I've worked with some very, very professional actors, some of whom it's been kind of like, well, who the heck are you to tell me what to do? Well, it's my job. Sorry. So it runs the gamut. I like working with professionals because I like to have a sense of trust in my actors. I want them to do their work first before I have to come in and make other suggestions. So often I will be the director who will pay more attention to the person who's not doing their job than I am to the one who's doing exactly what I would have wanted from the get-go. So those people who are doing exactly what I want are not going to get as much direction from me
Got it.
because I trust them.
That helps. I would think that kind of trust helps. And trust is a two-way, I mean, it's a two-way street. I know it's very cliche and it's can be said in so many different professions
Yeah.
and relationships, but the director actor relationship feels something where that's very much the case.
Yeah. And as I try to describe it to my to people that I'm working with, is as a director, my job is to not help the actors feel what the characters feel. That's their job.
Got it.
My job is to make sure that the audience gets what the characters are feeling. So my job is to be the eyes and ears of the audience first and foremost. I mean, they can be really feeling it 100%, but if it's not coming across, then I have to say, that's not reading. I'm not getting it.
Right.
That may be your intention, but it's not coming across. So let's try this or let's try that.
So you've acted, you've directed, you've dabbled in writing, I understand,
Yes.
plays. Where did your love and the interest for you in theater come from?
My mother.
Okay.
My mother was a professional actress in Germany before and into the beginning of the war.
Really?
Yes, my mother's a Christian,
Okay.
was a Christian. My father was also born and raised in Germany. He's Jewish, was Jewish. They are both deceased now. His family got out about 2 weeks before Kristallnacht
Wow.
in 38, so late.
Yeah.
They had been waiting and waiting for visas to go to Palestine, to emigrate to Palestine, and they never got them. So my grandfather had actually been in the United States for like 5 years I think it was like 1905 to 1910. He'd come to learn some aspects of business that he wanted to then take back to the family business, which he did. But from then on, he always spoke good English. He always read English newspapers. And so their second choice of where to go was to come to this country.
Okay.
So when my father was 16, in 1938, they arrived in America and ended in Chicago. But he went back as an American soldier.
Your father did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not a grunt.
Okay.
He was one of the Ritchie boys. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have not.
There's a wonderful documentary about them. Camp Ritchie in, I think, Maryland was used to train soldiers in interrogation techniques, in propaganda techniques, in undercover work. Basically, it was spy school.
Wow.
And yeah. So, and a lot of the Ritchie boys were Jews from all of the kind of Germany and the Eastern Bloc countries. So they had the language skills too, so they could do that.
Sure.
All of the Ritchie boys were kind of attached to a battalion. So they weren't kind of, like I said, he carried a gun, but I don't know that he ever shot it. But he had some very incredibly interesting experiences. He arrested Leni Riefenstahl, the director. Yes, after the war, right after the war, the director of Triumph of the Will.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good story. He's actually he was interviewed for the Shoah Foundation, so you can look it up if you have any.
Yeah, no, we'll look that up, and assuming we find it, we'll put the link in the show notes. That sounds fascinating. Like, his story is a play you could write.
That's what I've been working on, actually.
Look at that.
I'm working on it. It's actually the story of my brother and I, and then it goes to my father and mother and the influences that they had as, one being Christian, one being Jewish. And then, of course, the whole history of the Holocaust and the war. So when my father came back from the war with telling his mother, who had lost 2 of her sisters in the Holocaust and almost all of her cousins, and,
Yeah.
the family was decimated.
Yeah.
And she was not happy that my father wanted to bring this German Christian to be his wife. So there's all these reverberations of, when you talk about the Holocaust having effects down through generations, I got it from both sides in different ways.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think we know a lot about how the Jewish German and Jewish European side is affected. How did it affect your mother being a German but Christian?
Well, my mom was an actress, so she was an artist. She considered herself an artist, and they had a tendency to be more liberal. Her mother was absolutely anti-Hitler and used to go to his rallies and boo and hiss, and that she didn't get arrested is amazing. In fact, my mother's father died when she was only 9, and my grandmother told her that she was actually glad that he had not survived long enough for Hitler's rise to power, because she was afraid that he would have been a Nazi, and she did not want her children being Nazis. Both of her older brothers were conscripted into the army, of course. One ended up in an American prison camp, and the other one ended up in a Russian prison camp, and they were treated very differently.
I am sure they were.
Yeah. So, I mean, her experience of the war, she was from a city of Ulm, which is what New Ulm is named after.
Sure, absolutely. New Ulm, just
Yep.
south of the Twin Cities.
Right. About 80% of the city was bombed to smithereens.
Mm.
Most of the places that she was, she was still trying to be an actor, working in the theater. After a while, she wouldn't go into bomb shelters. She was just like, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. So she had a very laissez-faire attitude toward life, if you will.
Yeah.
Which when my parents met, it was just after the war, and my father he had done some of the interrogations for the Nuremberg trials. And then he was in charge of area in southern Germany, in Württemberg.
Mm-hmm.
And his job was to vet all of the people who were possibly going to take positions in the new German government to make sure that they had no ties to Nazism. That entire area was under his control. And they had commandeered a villa, from one of the SS people. And he said he was glad that happened because, she was going to take very good care of the property, even though she hated the fact that the American soldiers were in it. But she stayed as the housekeeper and she was going to take good care of that property. So she took good care of them. One day, my mother and the director of the company that she was working for, they needed to go to another small town to pick up another actress for the show that they were producing that night. But they didn't have enough gas. Nobody had gas except the Americans, the army. So my mother was trying to flirt with, what some of these army people to give her some gas. She was quite good at it. But the director went and talked to my father, who happened to have pulled in his Jeep at the same time, and said, look, this is who I am. And he said, no, I should get to know you. Why don't you come after your show or after whatever? Why don't you come up to the villa and we'll sit and chat for a bit? And the director said, well, I'm sorry, but I have this young actress with me that I'm responsible for. And my father said, oh, go ahead, bring her. So after the show, it was dancing and drinking, and they just were having a great old time. About 3 a.m., the director comes up to my mother and says, well, it's time to go, Gudrun. My mother's name was Gudrun.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother looked at my father, whom she was dancing with, and she just looked at the director and said, don't worry, I'm staying. And that was how they met.
That was it.
That was it.
That's fascinating. It's so interesting to hear how the effects of the generational trauma that comes from both sides of your family.
Yeah. And I definitely consider myself a Jew. My brother is Christian. I mean, he's chosen that path. He really followed after my mother's way of being in the world, and I followed after my father. I will say that my father, after 29 years of marriage, left my mom for the daughter of our rabbi, who's only 6 years older than I. So I have two younger sisters who have, and one is ultra-Orthodox and the other one is very conservative.
Okay.
And I've got these nieces and nephews that are like babies. So it's very strange.
That's weird how those things hit.
The ganze Mischbuche.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find it interesting though, like you followed your father religiously,
Mm-hmm.
but your mother artistically, like
Yes.
professionally.
Yeah.
That was where you found that the tie, the connection. It wasn't through the religion, it was through the art.
Yeah. It is. Though I must say that I love Christmas. I decorate. I do the whole 9 yards. I do a German Christmas, light candles on the tree. Totally freaked Avi out when he came over.
I would say that doesn't feel safe to me particularly.
They've been doing it in Germany for centuries. And if you know how to do it, it's pretty safe.
I suppose that's true.
Anyway, and it's beautiful. But anyway, yeah, and oftentimes, Hanukkah overlaps. So I'll be lighting the tree and lighting the candles at the same time. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's great that you still will, you find your own way to do your Judaism and how that intersects with your family and how you grew up and how you make your way in the world. And that's just sort of how it's just sort of how you do it.
It's how I do it. I honor both of my parents in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this new show, it's it's there is the like so much of America today, the race and religion
Hmm.
uh intersecting each other. The show feels very timely, just what's happening, just what the world is right now.
Yeah, the kind of the overarching of the play, I think, is really about how people find their own truth and find the way to be, to own that truth and to live it. Yes, it's about these two couples and how they
Mhm.
affect each other, but there's so much in it. The main character is a writer. He's written famous novels, and then there's this actress who's not Jewish, but you know, it, and his wife, Sophie, is also a writer. She's the one who's biracial. She's a biracial woman, so she's writing about different things too. There's so much about narrative and about your story and the story you tell yourself about who you are and the story you let other people see about who you are. And that to me is what the show is about. And that's what we're trying to find.
When you are looking at opportunities, when Barbara approached you, I guess specifically for the show, what was it about? Was it the story, the script, the sort of general overview that you're like, yeah, this is material I can work with? Because obviously, I'm sure you read plenty of things where you'll take a look and it's not for you for some reason.
Yeah, there have definitely been plenty of shows that I just had no interest in doing. The writing, again, Anna Ziegler is such a smart writer,
Mhm.
and I was just sucked into it immediately. I just loved the writing of it. And I also knew that it was going to be a tricky show to stage in the space that, Six Points has. But that seems to be, Barbara calls me for tricky shows.
It's good to be trusted.
It is. It is. I mean, I actually won an Ivy Award for directing one of the shows that I did for her. I don't know if you know what that is, but
It's like the local Tony, basically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Used to be. That doesn't exist anymore, which I think is kind of sad. But
Oh, that's very sad.
yeah. And I had 10 actors on that little stage all the time.
Oof.
They never left. And it ranged from 1925 to 2003. This was set in Poland. As time went on, various characters are killed off or die off
Mhm.
until the very last one. But everybody stays on stage because it's important that there's this resonance of the members of our class with Holocaust play.
Mhm.
And it was very intense. And I think she was really tied into the play too, but she had no clue who was going to be able to direct it.
Right.
And I did My Name is Asher Lev for her,
Okay.
and then one of the Hanukkah plays.
Well, it's nice that she's got somebody she can call on for the dirty work.
She's got some other very good directors in her stable.
There is no question. She has tremendous talent around, that she can call on, whether it's acting or directing. But yeah, it is quite an operation that she has sort of started and run for a very long time now. And it's great. Like love getting to talk to the people who are involved in the shows. It's just such a talented group of people that are coming through Six Points Theater, on a show by show basis. It's so fun to connect with them.
Well, I sure hope that you'll come see the show, that other people will see the show. It's not heavy. There's some, very deep moments in it, but there's also a lot of humor. But that's what it's about. It's about, growing up and becoming your best self or trying to become your best self.
Well, that's never an easy thing either. But deep is
No.
deep is okay though. Like
Yeah.
not every show needs to be like the super heavy, Holocaust theme show that you directed there, but it's good to have a mix of, types of source material to be working from.
Yes. Yep.
And it's great that you're working in a community where there is no shortage of talented people doing that kind of work. I mean,
Right.
it is a great theater community here.
I actually left the Twin Cities and we moved back because this is where I can do my work. And so, yeah.
Where did you leave to, if you don't mind me asking?
We moved to Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
My wife had a sister who lived in a golf community there,
Okay.
and we both loved golf. So we thought, oh, we'll get away from the winters like everybody thinks, right?
Right.
And we were in the corner of the state where all of the money in the state is. I mean, there's still a lot of poverty there, but I mean, Walmart,
Yeah.
JB Hunt Trucking, Tyson Chicken. I mean, it's all concentrated in that county. And there is actually about 60 miles from where we were living, a really good theater, Theater Square. And I was able to work with them a couple times. But how can you go to rehearsal when you have to drive 60 miles?
Yeah, it's a long way away.
Really, really difficult. And there was nothing else. It was, I mean, it was a cultural wasteland. And luckily, this was before the Trump years, or we couldn't have survived.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I can understand that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we are very glad to have you back and here in the Twin Cities again. By no means a cultural wasteland. In fact, completely the opposite.
Exactly.
Well, Miriam, last couple of questions before we let you go. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Yom Kippur.
How come?
I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Okay.
And one of the 12 steps is that you make amends for the harm that you have caused. And that to me seems very similar in a way to atonement.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I try to practice it on a regular basis, not just on Yom Kippur. I try to make that be part of my spiritual practice. But having there be that framework that the holiday gives, I appreciate that.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. I don't think we've done a bunch of these. Don't think I've had it phrased quite like that. Yom Kippur gets picked more than you'd think, but appreciate the thoughtfulness in that answer, though. And last question: what is your favorite Jewish food?
Now that's tough.
We save the really hard ones for last.
Yeah, really. Well, I love noodle kugel, the sweet version with raisins and the good stuff. I love harosas. In fact, I took some home from the Seder I was at. I can have it at home. There's a few that I really dislike. I'm not a filter fish fan at all.
Okay.
But yeah, those are probably the two big ones.
Those are two good ones to choose from. Absolutely.
And challah. I eat challah all the time.
Well, of course, absolutely. I mean, challah might be the worst part of Passover, is having that one Shabbat where you can't have it. That's a tough one. But yeah, no, for sure. Can't go wrong with a good challah. Well, Miriam Monasch, director of the play The Wanderers by 6 Points Theater. It is running now through May 14th. We will have links in the show notes where you can get your tickets and go see this. But Miriam, thank you so much for joining me and taking time out of your schedule to talk about the show and yourself. We really appreciate it, and break a leg with the rest of the run.
Thank you so much. This has really been fun for me too.
I am so glad to hear that. Thank you.
All right.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.